What do you give a dog with a fever?
Yeah, she's funny.
You get say everything you get.
Give it ketchup and mustard.
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
That's the best thing for a hot dog.
Wow. Oh.
Calm down, you win.
Somebody answer a question.
That was a good riddle.
What page?
That was a good riddle.
734. 230. No, 734.
734.
Ketchup and mustard says that's the best on the hot dog. Or that's like that's
On
good
the
on hot
Frankfurt
dog.
or whatever.
I really hate that word.
Frankfurt?
You guys want to write them out?
What?
I said, who has an answer to one on 734?
Oh. Okay.
I got you.
Which question though?
Any of them.
Yana,
It's when the French and the.
which one are you picking?
Oh, 1A.
1A.
It's when the French and the English, but like united.
What's the question say?
Oh, what is the American Expeditionary Force?
So what was the American Expeditionary Force?
Oh, it was like the.
Bella.
They wanted the U.S. troops known as the American Expeditionary Force to join French and British troops.
So what was the American Expeditionary Force?
French and British generals called to
No, I don't want you to read a chapter. I want you to tell me what the American Expeditionary Force was. Ben.
There were the first 2 million troops sent to Europe, led
So
by.
that was the first American troops in World War I. In fact, all of them were called. Basically, all the troops of World War I that were American is the American Expeditionary Force. Okay, who has it? Greta?
Can I do 1C?
1C.
Russia left the war because of too many problems in their own country.
And primarily, what was the biggest one?
Starvation and hunger.
Which led to what?
Something.
Joey. Do you have an answer to what that led to? The problems in Russia?
Revolution.
A revolution? Or a civil war? You got another one, Joey?
Yeah. 3A.
3A.
They were required to like surrender their U-boats, big guns, aircraft, tanks, and all their conquered territory.
We're going to get into that today, because that was a big thing. First of all, what is an armistice? So you should know what that term means. What's an armistice mean? Okay. A ceasefire, a truce. So you agree to stop shooting at each other. What usually ends wars? To make them officially over.
Treaties?
A treaty. So you have to have a treaty. And that's what we'll talk about today after we watch a couple of the videos on Homefront. So a ceasefire just means they quit. In fact, they had a ceasefire in the first year of the war. The first Christmas, the two sides quit shooting at each other. And they actually, one side came across the trenches and they celebrated Christmas together. And the Germans and the British, so they played a soccer game together. This is the ridiculousness of war, okay? So they had an informal armistice. They just decided, okay, we're going to quit shooting. And then they got orders, what?
Start shooting.
You got to go back. You got to start shooting each other again. Even though as they left, many of them pledged, well, I'll shoot over your head. But once they got back into it, okay, again, war desensitizes you to the reality. Okay, anybody else know another answer? Andrew.
1B, the Russian Revolution changed the course of the war because Russia was no longer able to fight World War I, causing Germany to divert their troops to the Western Front.
So it went from a two-front war for Germany to a one-front war. And if the U.S. would have got into the war, Germany probably would have won. Okay? Let's skip up to 739. You were supposed to have read to that too, right? Basically, we were supposed to finish the chapter. How many actually did it? 1, 2, 3. So we're wasting our time to do this. So we're gonna just show you the videos. We're gonna go over some of the stuff that was in this section. Your job is to go back, because you're gonna be tested over it, okay? To know where the stuff is. You're gonna get a review worksheet today that's a what? I told you last time. Who remembers?
Like a bonus.
A bonus. That means what?
You don't have to do it.
You don't have to do it. Over distance learning, I will give you the answers. And then we're gonna take the test over distance learning, okay? So right now, you can write that in your plan, if you haven't already.
So it can't count against you.
It'll be due the first time of our distance learning. So the first time is our Zoom meeting, which is on what day? Let me see here for you guys. Zoom meeting Tuesday, the 30th. March 30th is the Zoom meeting. That's when we'll go over it and review for the test. And then I'll post the test probably on Wednesday or Thursday, and then you can do it whenever you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna look at the role of three things here, if we have time. One is African Americans. They alluded to it in the last video a little bit. You should have read a little bit. What's African American? What changed for them in World War I? Or did anything change? We don't know yet, so maybe watch the movie, okay? So many went and actually fought in the war. And when they got over in Europe, you know what they found out? How were they treated in Europe?
Not well. Or better than they were.
Much better than they were treated in the United States. They were treated like normal people. But when they got back to the United States, what happened? They're again treated as second class people, lower. That's one of the things. That's on the foreign front. But remember, the war is always how many fronts? Two. What's the other front called?
Home front.
The home front. What about for the ones that stayed home? What changed for them? Okay?
They had to work at jobs.
So it totally changed their lives, because most blacks before this were working where? On farms in the South. Who remembers what that was called? That whole economic system? Where they didn't own any land, so they had to borrow what? They had to borrow the land, then they had to raise crops and then pay off the borrowing the land with their what? Okay, or a share of the crops. That's why it was called what? Share cropping. Does that sound familiar to anybody?
Yep.
Maybe I'm gonna show you the notes first. So Chase can do this, and then you can watch the videos on your own, Chase. So let's look at, we know the war ended when? So when was this armistice? November 11th, 1918. Even before this is happening, Wilson has a plan to end the war. What's Wilson's plan called? Anybody remember reading about that?
League of Nations.
Some of you are going to get this age in a couple, 1 year, some 2 years. Raise your hand. What's his plan called? You guys can read, can't you? What's his plan called?
Wilson plan for peace.
What's it called?
League of Nations.
Peace without victory?
It was called 14 points. Because there were how many points?
14.
Very good. You're right on it.
13.
Okay? There were 14 points he wanted to go and said, if we follow these 14 points, we can prevent wars. In fact, his goal was this: peace without victory. What does that mean?
No war.
No winner or loser.
No winner or loser. Again, we said Wilson was what? Idealistic. The United States didn't go through 5-6 years of what? What kind of war?
Civil. Revolution.
What kind of war was this?
Oh,
A stalemate. Was trench warfare, was terrible conditions. We didn't go through that. We only saw a small portion of it. So when somebody goes through that, you think that you want to say, okay, we're not going to have a winner. No, Great Britain and France want to make sure what? That never happened again. And who are they blaming?
Germany.
Germany. Well, Wilson was idealistic, so he came up with a plan. Okay? First point, end secret treaties. No more secret treaties, can't have them. Who had a secret treaty that led to the breaking out to World War?
Serbia.
Serbia with who? Serbia with Russia had a secret treaty. If that wasn't a secret treaty, maybe this war might have been prevented. He said, we need to have freedom of the seas. What's that mean?
Nobody controls ocean.
Nobody controls the ocean. You should be able to put ships, go anywhere you want without people interfering with your trade. Remember, this was one of the major reasons what? That we got in the war, right?
Yeah.
3, reduce tariffs. What's a tariff? You should be writing these down. You will see them. Would this make a good essay question? It might.
Yeah.
Taxes on what?
Taxes.
Taxes on goods coming into your country. Now, what would that have to do with peace? What happens when you reduce taxes of goods coming into your country?
Then everybody's happy since they have no
What will that encourage?
Trade.
Trade. People that trade with one another are much less likely to what?
kill each other.
To go to war, right? If you're getting along, you're not going to go to war. So he said, let's encourage trade. Reduce armaments. What's armament? What's an armament?
Oh,
Remember one of the causes of the war that's related to this? Militarism. Militarism is the buildup of weapons in armies. Armaments are the weapons and ammunition. If we reduce those, then there's less chance of what? People wanting them to use them. one of the reasons we said they had all these weapons and armaments, they wanted to do what? They wanted to try them out. If you got a Christmas present that was really, would you just start stockpiling your Christmas presents? No, you want to do what?
Use them.
You want to try them out. Even when it's probably not the wise thing. So if you ever have one of those aunts or uncles that give you that present, that Christmas present that you can't use till the summer? You got to get a present that you can't use till the summer. Did you want to try it out before the summer?
Yeah.
It can be like my wife's family. You know what they did? They had an unfinished basement. And they plugged the floor drain, and they flooded it every day after school. So they put 2 feet of water in it so that they could have water games all year long. Not a good thing to do. Okay, points 5 through 13, instead of going each one point by point, you just need to know what self-determination means, okay? Self-determination, basically Europe had all these national groups. And so the self-determination was, let's redraw the boundaries of Europe so each national group gets what? Their own country. Again, this is idealistic, because realistically, do all these national groups only live in one little spot? They live all over the place. So redrawing the boundaries was difficult. But that was his goal. Because if we do that, that will reduce what? What was one of the causes of the war? Got it? Nationalism, okay? So that would help reduce that. But the point that he wanted more than anything else, he was willing to sacrifice other stuff so he could get this last point. A League of Nations. That means all the nations joined together that would try to work things out how? Peacefully, instead of through violence. He wanted that point more than anything else. And what's ironic is this is the one point that kept the U.S. from actually signing the treaty. We'll get that in a second, okay? So, again, idealistic, let's have peace without victory, okay? Well, then let's look at the treaty. Where was the treaty at? Who knows where the treaty was at? You ever have this on a test? You could probably, if you put this answer, you're going to be right most of the time, because this is where most treaties have taken place. Andrew.
Paris.
Paris. Outside of Paris, in a palace. Anybody know the name of the palace? Louis the 13th built it. The extravagant. It's called Versailles. So it's called the Treaty of Versailles. V-E-R. Who went? Here we go. Big four. U.S. Woodrow Wilson went. This breaks precedent. A precedent is something that's usually done, so it's not a law. Like a precedent for St. Joseph's School. Who knows a precedent for St. Joseph's School? It's not written in any policy, but something that's usually done. Anybody know? Except this year it didn't happen. 7th grade usually goes where? Goes to Long Lake. That's been a precedent for so many years. It's not written in anywhere. It's not a rule. Okay? In 8th grade we have a field trip. Okay? It's not written anywhere as a rule, but it's been followed year after year after year. So pretty soon if it's followed year after year after year, people think what? It's a rule. Okay? That's what a precedent is. He broke precedent, because usually at a treaty, does the president go?
No.
What's he do?
Sends a
He sends a guy to represent us. an ambassador. But he felt so strongly about his 14 points that he went. In France, you had Georges Clemenceau. In Great Britain, you had David Lloyd George. In Italy, Victoria Orlando. Does this seem unusual here? Who's at the treaty?
All the presidents. No, it's not.
Who's not there?
Germany.
These are all what? These are all the Allied powers. None of the Central powers are there. What's that tell you? Is Wilson going to get his peace without victory?
No.
So if these guys are going to decide the results of the war, who's it going to favor? It's going to favor them. Okay? So each side came with their own agenda. Wilson, we already said what his agenda was. He wanted to have peace without victory. Great Britain and France, what did they want? Okay? We're going to punish Germany. It's their fault. They got to take responsibility. So this never happens again. In Italy, remember they switched sides at the beginning so they would get what? Some territory. So that's what they were looking for in the treaty. So you can see Wilson's and theirs, do these fit together? They're way opposite, right? Peace without victory versus punish Germany. If punish Germany, is there a victor there? Yeah, it's Great Britain and France. We won, Germany gets punished. So, what has to happen when you have two sides apart from each other? What has to happen? What's that word? If you want to come to an agreement, you got to what? Got to compromise. So Wilson compromised. Do you know what he compromised? He compromised the peace without victory so he could get what? What did he want more than anything else? The League of Nations. He wanted the League of Nations. He wanted that to be in the treaty. So it was in the treaty, but he did not get peace without victory. Germany was what? Punished. How were they punished? Okay, they had to first of all take full responsibility from the war. Okay, then they had to do this. Is it up here? Right here. They had to pay reparations. Reparations are like punishment paid. So you're paying for causing this war. So all the destruction that happened to France, who's going to pay for it? Germany. It's your fault. All of it's your fault. This is important to note because a lot of the things that happened in World War I here eventually caused what?
World War II.
World War II. It allowed Hitler to come into power. Because Hitler pointed back to this treaty to win the support of the German people when we get to World War II. In fact, when we get to World War II, we see Germany conquers France in World War II. Guess where Hitler took the surrender? In the very same railway car that Germany surrendered for the armistice for World War I. So Wilson gave up this. So Germany took the blame. It's all Germany's fault. They have to pay all this money. And what's ridiculous, we're going to see what happens. Who came out of the war economically booming? Us. U.S. has all the money. Who owes us a bunch of money? Great Britain and France owe us a bunch of money. Why? Because they were borrowing money for all these weapons and stuff. So they're sending money to the U.S. Germany's over here. Because of these, they have to do what? They have to make payments to Germany and France. Where was Germany getting the money? They were borrowing it from us. Germany borrowed money from us so they could give it to Great Britain and France, so Great Britain and France could pay us back. That make sense? It does, should make sense because it's crazy.
Wait, if we're doing
So
Germany, we
basically-
can make a profit.
Okay, we're giving our money to get back our money.
Did Germany ever pay us?
Now, here's the bad part, for Wilson anyway. He came back thinking, okay, I got the League of Nations. And the League of Nations is what people didn't want. Or at least some Henry Cabot Lodge in Congress, who was Wilson was what party?
Democrat.
He was a Democrat. Who controlled Congress?
Republicans.
Republicans. And the Republicans wanted to get back to the way it was. What was the way it was?
Isolation.
Isolationism. So why wouldn't they want the League of Nations?
Because that requires you to.
They say, if we have the League of Nations, it's gonna cause us to get involved in the world, and we don't wanna do that. Wilson went on a speaking tour around the country, rode trains all up and down the United States, trying to get public support for people to say this treaty's good. He had a stroke. So for the last months of his presidency, not his pregnancy, his presidency. For the last months, at least you're catching that, means you're actually staying with me, good. I just
You
need
did that on
to, I
purpose.
need to insert those screw ups all the time, huh? He was incapacitated. Basically, who was running our country? His wife, Edith, was running our country. And so after this, they passed a law that said, well, if the president becomes incapacitated, who has to take over? Vice president. So they had to pass a law for that. But Edith Wilson was the one running the country, okay? So we never ratified the Versailles Treaty. We didn't sign it. For the one reason that Wilson wanted us to sign it, because of the Versailles Treaty, or because of the League of Nations. We signed a separate treaty with those powers. So we tried to go back to return to our normal foreign policy, which is to what? Stay out of the world. And it's probably not realistic because you could easily argue after World War I, who came out one of the strongest, if not the strongest nation in the world?
Us.
Us. Because we didn't suffer any damage to our land. We got rich from the sale of all this stuff. Our army became what?
Bigger.
Much bigger and stronger, okay? So the United States came out of World War I at becoming a world power. And as a world power, we're gonna find out that you can't do what? Not stay out of the world's affairs. You gotta get involved as a world power. Okay? So we're gonna look at these two videos. So that covers all this. Anybody have questions on this? So we're gonna look at the videos on African American role in the war and selling the war. How do you sell the war? So we're going to do a backtrack to the war. So you can look at those. I don't know if I put those videos on the Google page, but you can go down to the bottom, Chase, and look at the list of videos if you want to see some of the ones on the home front. So